What's going on, guys? My name is Arrow, and today I am bringing you a build a long time in the making, bringing some of my favorite things together: Cobra Lash, power charge stacking, and elusive scaling. Let's get into it. So as a lot of you know, one of my favorite things to do in this game is to scale power charges, because you can do so many interesting things with power charges. You can get mana regen from the tree, you can get crit multi, you can get area of effect. There's a lot of things that you can get per power charge with different items, cluster jewels, things like that. Something that I've never done, but I've always wanted to do, is make an attack-based Badge of the Brotherhood build. What Badge of the Brotherhood mainly does is it takes your cap of your power charges and makes it equal to your cap of your frenzy charges. So if you get 10 total power charges, it'll make your max frenzies 10 as well. The main idea behind this is you can get tons of damage, attack, cast speed, things like that, multi, from power charges and frenzy charges when you scale a bunch of them. But more importantly, for this build in particular, something that we get from Badge of the Brotherhood is 10% increased effect of elusive on you per power charge. We get 8 power charges in this build as is. You can get more, but we have 8, and that gives you 80% increased effect of elusive. And you combine that with the Assassin Ascendancy and some other methods of scaling elusive. So elusive gives you 15% chance to avoid all damage from hits, 30% increased movement speed. 15% chance to avoid all damage from hits is effectively a dodge mechanic. So dodge was mostly removed from the game. There's still acrobatics, which no one uses because it's not efficient. But dodge used to be a really good layer to add to evasion, to make it so if you didn't evade an attack, you could still dodge it afterwards. So what we do here is we scale our elusive effect so high that we end up with a 56% chance to avoid all damage when your elusive is at max. Now, elusive is a degrading mechanic, so over time it goes down, but we have Withering Step, which refreshes our elusive, and that allows us to keep a very high amount of elusive. So let's talk about power charges and frenzy charges. Frenzy charges by default give you 4% attack and cast speed and 4% more damage per charge. Power charges give you 40% crit chance per power charge. Combine that with the Assassin Ascendancy, we have 5% crit multiplier per power charge, and you get a substantial amount of bonuses from having these charges up. This build is always at crit cap very easily with power charges, and the frenzy charges give us an absurd amount of more damage and attack speed. Another thing that we get from our power charges from the Oxium Crystal Belt is Mana Leech and elemental damage with attack skills. Generally, this belt is only used for builds that want to self-chill in order to get the bonuses from reversing that with Winterweave. We don't do that here. The reason that we use the Oxium is because with attack quality catalysts, you get 30% increased elemental damage with attack skills per power charge. We have 8, which means we have 240% increased damage just from our belt. Now, this build loves a Headhunter, so if you have a Headhunter, that's obviously better. However, this belt is fantastic for non-Headhunter versions and gives us a ton of damage. It also gives us a couple hundred energy shield, which is really good because we take Ghost Stance. The downside of this belt is that you absolutely need to be freeze and chill immune because you don't have much ES and it makes your chill effect and freeze duration based off of your energy shield. So if you don't have that, you're gonna get chilled and frozen all the time. However, we are fully ailment immune on this build. We'll get into that. Let's talk about the defensive layers. So as far as attacks go, we have evade cap, which is 95%. We easily achieve that with a few different sources of evasion and evade chance, and blind as well. So that means 1 out of every 20 attacks is going to get through our evasion. After that, we also have 41% block. The way that evasion and block work is the game decides if you have evaded an attack, and then if you have, nothing happens, you don't get hit. But if you don't evade the attack, then your block has a chance to block it. So 1 in 20 attacks get through, and then 41% of those get blocked. After that, if it doesn't get blocked, we have a chance to avoid the damage from our elusive scaling. We have a 56% chance at cap to avoid damage. That generally drops down to about 45% by the time our Withering Step hits. So it's somewhere between 45 and 56% chance to avoid. When you combine all these sources, we have a 1.2% chance to be hit by an attack. That is nearly 1 out of every 100 attacks that would have landed on our character is avoided. That amount of just pure dodge ability makes his character feel effectively immortal from attacks. I don't even remember the last time I got attacked on this character and noticed it. Because if you get hit 1 in 90 and it's not enough to get through your evasion, it's a small attack, Ghost Shroud will just immediately recover it. So a lot of times you don't even see when that 1 in 100 attacks gets through. On top of that, we have really, really good recovery, so if we do get hit, we can recover pretty quickly. So that's attacks. The nice thing about avoiding, dodging, and evading attacks is it's not just phys damage. The problem with armor, in my opinion, is that armor only affects when you are hit by physical damage. It does not include elemental damage. These days, we have so many different ways for monsters to convert their own damage or get added as extra elemental damage. So when an attack comes in, if it's, let's say it's 100 fizz damage, but then they have 50% fizz as extra lightning, well, you're mitigating that fizz damage with your armor, but you're not mitigating it with the elemental damage. That goes against your resistances. So evasion, dodge, and block all prevent the entirety of the hit if it's an attack. I prefer that. Now, I don't play hardcore, so on this build, in theory, you could technically 1 in 100, get a big crit on you, whatever. But for softcore, this is enough to effectively never die from attacks. So let's talk about spells. How do we get tanky against spells? Well, we are an assassin. We take the Trickster Ascendancy node with Forbidden Flesh and Flame Jewels, Spellbreaker, that gives you increased spell suppressed damage reduction. So first we have 56% chance to avoid damage from hits. That includes spells. So our elusive is going to make us dodge about half of all incoming spells. So then when we do get hit, if we are on full energy shield, 66% of that spell damage is reduced between Spellbreaker and some nodes on the tree. That is an incredibly large amount of spell suppression. I regularly tank Shaper Slams and Maven Slams and all sorts of fun stuff. We also have on our helmet that during soul gain prevention, we have a 12% chance to avoid elemental damage. That includes hits from spells and from attacks. So that 56% avoid that we get from elusive, well, now it's 66% if we are in soul gain prevention. We only have one Val skill. It is Val Haste. We use it as soon as it comes up to keep really good uptime of the move speed and attack speed. And then when it's down, we actually are happier because now we're tankier. So really, really strong. This build is so tanky. I had a blast playing this. This was a dream of mine to get an attack-based Badge of the Brotherhood build out there. Now, I chose Cobra Lash because I love Cobra Lash. Would this be better with Lightning Strike or Venom Gyre? Undoubtedly. You could take this template and apply a lot of different attack skills to it, and it would work for all of them, because basically what you're doing is you're scaling attack speed and elemental damage. You could throw pretty much any skill that would work with a claw or dagger into this build and it would function. However, I chose Cobra Lash because it's my favorite. Let's go through the gear quickly. So Cobra Lash enchant, very important. We got +1 power charges and fizz taken as cold. The reason we get some fizz taken as cold is because we don't have any physical damage reduction really. So when an attack does get through 1 in 100, assuming it's all physical, we want to take some of that as elemental so we can take less damage from it. This shield is nuts. I got a +1 power charge shield that also happened to have block on it. So got very lucky there finding this. It actually was not that expensive. And then I crafted it up myself. Got very, very lucky. I also hit block on the affixes. Don't even ask me how I crafted this because you're never going to get this lucky. But I do highly, highly recommend at least getting Elia Void, Life, and then some block chance if you can. Badge of the Brotherhood, mandatory for this build. Allocating Overcharge because that gives us a power charge over here. The chest, pretty straightforward. We get Grace Effect. That gives us like 1 or 2% evade chance that gets us to cap, so that was pretty important. We have some spell suppression on here, and Elia Void. That helps us get to cap. We use Legacy of Fury because these boots give you Scorch. Scorch lowers all Ellie resists for enemies, and we do try Ellie with this build. Oxium, we already talked about. The gloves, it gives us Rage, and then just Life and a bunch of resists, which we really needed. Our rings, pretty straightforward. This is just Life, resists, Strength and Intelligence. Minus mana cost is pretty important. You don't need to get this on both, I don't think. And if you do, you could just take this Life and mana on hit. If you don't feel like you have enough mana. But I thought that the mana leech that you get from this belt was more than enough. And this one I got some multi. That's not necessary. It's very much overkill. This build has over 1,000 crit multi. Also, I went well out of my way to get Chaos Res capped. You don't have to do that. But I found it was really nice for dots, which this build is not very strong against because our life pool is pretty low. So I think getting Chaos Res capped is important, which is another reason why I have it on the tree here. This claw probably cost me 50 exalts to make, but you could probably buy it for 7. I wanted to make a really, really good claw, and I just got so unlucky that I think I failed a 2 out of 3 chance to hit 5 or 6 times in a row with Ashling. So 4 divines to craft, then 3 divines for the Ashling. I spent so much currency on this stupid claw. I should have just bought one. But yeah, the double damage while focused is really nice. You could get regular double damage too. I don't mind pressing the focus button. I have space on my toolbar for it. But yeah, you want Tri-Elite, you want attack speed and crit chance. The Flasks, Dying Sun, you gotta have this. 2 additional projectiles. Starlight Chalice, believe it or not, the 200 ward that we get from this chalice is basically just life. We get hit so rarely that when we do get hit, we always have our ward up, which kind of makes it just like a 200 life flask, which you can't get life on flasks anywhere. So pretty cool there. Also, it gives us exposure to all 3 elements, which is super nice because we are Tri-Ellie. And then effective non-damaging elements, so bigger shocks, bigger chills. We have an Onslaught Flask with reduced effective curses. I believe we are curse immune with all of our sources of, I think we have some on the tree. And then we get some evasion, some move speed, and then evasion and move speed from this flask as well. Let's talk about the tree. This massive thread of hope, not mandatory. These are super expensive, and we only get a couple of things here. You could just take down these points and then put them into pathing to this Forces of Nature, and it's fine. I put in an Inspired Learning here because these are pretty reasonable to get. If you are making a build that costs 30 divines, it's not unreasonable to have an Inspired Learning in it. This build can definitely be done for less than 30 divines, but I would say with a +1 power charge shield, it probably would cost you about 30 to make it as is. But at this point in the league, who knows what it's going to cost you. Good luck buying gear right now. We take pretty much all the claw stuff that we need all the claw stuff that we can. Something that we take over here that's pretty unusual is we take crit chance against blinded enemies and blind enemies on hit with attacks. This is actually a pretty powerful wheel, and since we come up here anyway to get phasing, this wheel gives us a bunch of crit and blind, and this makes sure we're always blinding enemies. We are always at the evade cap. You want to get Fan of Blades on both your large clusters for an extra projectile. We have follow through for each remaining chain damage, very, very strong, and repeater on our mediums. We have 3 of those, and then we have this Megalomaniac, mostly for Elegant Form, which gives us Spell Suppress and Avoid Ellie, which gets us to the cap for both. It also has Self-Control on it, which gives us mana reservation efficiency. You can get other sources of mana reservation efficiency, but it's really nice to do with a Megalomaniac. All right, so the Ascendancy, number 1 most important thing, Mistwalker. So take no extra damage from crits while elusive. We're always elusive. We literally take no extra damage from crits. That is so huge, especially on a build that doesn't have a lot of actual mitigation of hits. It has avoidance of hits. So when you do get hit, you're much less likely to die if you can never be crit. So this is so, so strong just for that note. Forget the fact that it gives us elusive and increased effective elusive. Then power charge stuff here, very, very, very nice. +1, power charge generation, multi per power charge, and crit chance. And then lastly, can't be reflected if you're critting, which I don't know if we get that on all enemies at all times, so I wouldn't rely on that. But it also gives us damage reduction when there are multiple rares or uniques, and more damage against single targets. And now we will go through the gems. In our claw, we have Whirling Blades and Fortify. While you are mapping, Fortify is up a decent amount of the time. And it's not always a full Fortify, but I figured for 1 gem slot, even if it's 10% reduction on average, that's still a nice thing to have. Haste, we don't use the actual haste aura, we just use Val Haste. Go to our helmet. This is where our auras are. We have Precision, we have Discipline, Grace, and Herald of Ice. Discipline is mostly to enable our Watcher's Eye, which I did not talk about. This gives us 26 ES per enemy hit while affected by Discipline. That's huge. Also, it's nice to give us extra for our Ghost Dance. In our shield, we have a level 3 call. We have a level 3 Immortal Call and Life Tap, so we can cast it even though we don't have a lot of mana. Immortal Call is another way of reducing incoming damage. So for us, we don't really take many hits. But when we do take a hit, let's say it chunks us for half of our health, it's unlikely we're going to get hit again. But if we do, our Immortal Call will be up to help reduce that incoming damage. It gives us time to recover, get back to full health before we take another hit. In our boots, we have Herald of Thunder. It's just good damage. Withering Step, Berserk, and Ancestral Protector. Now, Ancestral Protector and Berserk cannot be leveled up all the way because we don't have the strength for it, but they're actually pretty effective at these tiers as well. If you get more strength, you can put them at a higher tier. If you're wearing a Headhunter, etc., you can get them to a higher level. In our gloves, we have a Sniper's Mark and Mark on Hit and a Blood Rage connected to Life Tap so we can cast it at any time. Sniper's Mark is just huge, huge damage. Then we'll go to our 6th link. We have our Divergent Cobra Lash at level 21 here. Level 21 is not necessary. We are linking it to Awakened Elemental Damage with attacks, Trinity support because we're doing all 3 damage types. This is very easy to keep up to max. Power Charge on crit. Anomalous Nightblade. Nightblade is so much damage. It's crazy damage. Anytime you're using a claw, you pretty much need to be using Nightblade support. And then Inspiration to keep our mana cost down. Mana cost is at 5. You could use Diversion to get it even lower. I didn't find that to be necessary. And that is all for the gems. All right, that's going to be it for me. Thank you so much for watching. I had an absolute blast playing this build and putting it together. I finally made my dream come true of using a badge of the Brotherhood, not just with Winter Orb, not just with Blade Vortex, but with an attack-based build. And not only that, but Cobra Lash. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Feel free to take this base and modify it into something like Lightning Strike, Venom Gyre, etc. This is a very, very strong core that you can turn into something else. And I hope that when I make videos like this, I don't just give you a build template that you can go take and implement, but something that maybe inspires you to make your own build in the future. So let me know if you do either this build or something like it down in the comments. I appreciate you all so much. And as always, take care.